Hello, and welcome to the Night Sky Reader. I'm here with a story to help you relax, meditate, or gently drift to sleep. Tonight, singing sand dunes in the evening wind. Settle in, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin. Tonight, if the air stays this dry and the slope stays loose enough to move in one clean sheet, this dune may sing. I arrive in the hour when the heat begins to leave the sand. The light is still on the upper curve, pale gold with a little rose in it, but the lower ground is already cooling into gray. In front of me, one large crescent dune lies apart from the others, just enough to be read clearly. Its windward back rises in a long, patient incline. Its sheltered face drops more steeply on the far side, where loose grains collect and wait for gravity. If you walk with me slowly, we can stay with this one dune for the whole evening and let it show us how it keeps the memory of wind. Singing sand dunes are real. They do not sing often, and not every dune can do it. The sound depends on ordinary things being arranged with unusual precision. Grains that are very dry, well sorted, similar in size, often rounded by long travel, a steep slipface ready to release, a moving layer thin enough to slide together. If those conditions line up, the sand can produce a low sustained note. Such dunes are sometimes called booming dunes, though the sound itself is usually less dramatic than the name suggests. Tonight I am not here for spectacle. I am here for the small mechanics of it, and for the way attention settles when there is only one subject, one evening, one slope changing by degrees. At the base I stop and press the toe of my boot into the sand. The surface gives way softly, then firms a little lower down. The topmost layer still holds the warmth of the day. Just beneath it, the sand is cooler already, as if the evening has started underground before it fully appears in the air. When I crouch and let a little of it run through my fingers, the grains look almost uniform in the fading light, pale and dry and clean. They do not cling to my skin. That matters. Any moisture between grains changes how they move. Even slight dampness can quiet them completely. Behind me, the open desert is broad and spare, but I am not drawn out toward distance tonight. This dune is enough. Its crescent points downwind, and the curve itself tells a history of repeated shaping. No single gust makes this form. Wind arrives again and again from the same general direction, lifting grains on the gentle side, carrying some over the crest, letting them fall and gather on the lee. That repetition is what gives the dune its readable structure. It is not a monument. It is a process that happens to hold still for a while. There is no need to wait for a result. There may be a note later, and there may not. The evening is already full of what matters. Heat loosens. Air dries. Slope stores. Grains sort themselves through old, patient motion. The dune will tell us what it can. I begin to walk along the windward side, where the day's prevailing wind has spent its long labor. The windward face feels different at once. My steps sink less deeply here. The slope is long and modest, and the surface is marked by ripples, each one running almost parallel to the next, low and even, like something brushed into place. These ripples are not decoration. They show how the wind has been spending its force, nudging grains forward in countless short hops. Some creep, some settle into small ridges where the air slows. From a little distance the pattern looks smooth. Up close it is all sorting and correction. I put my hand down on one ripple crest, and then in the trough beside it, the sand is tight enough to keep its shape under my palm. A few grains roll free, but most stay where they are. This side is not where a dune sings. It is a place of approach, storage, arrangement. Windward sand is compacted by repeated traffic. The angle is lower. The grains have room to travel, pause, and sort before they reach the edge where things become unstable. That sorting is one of the quiet reasons a few dunes can produce sound while most remain silent. The windward sand has been handled by the same repeating forces so many times that coarse fragments are mostly absent. No scattered pebbles, no obvious clods, no damp crust. Just grain after grain, dry and ready, though not yet released. Under my boots there is a faint sound, only the smallest hiss. It is the sound of surface grains brushing past one another without enough depth or slope to organize into anything more. I listen anyway. In the desert, the early forms of a thing often arrive long before the thing itself. The air has thinned as the sun lowers. It feels cleaner on the face, cooler across the wrists. I become aware of how quietly the desert evening changes things. There is no sudden turn. Warmth simply stops pressing so hard. Shadows lengthen at the base of the ripples. The grain color shifts from honey to bone. One side of my body still notices the day, and the other has already entered night. I notice, too, how quickly I want to explain every mark. There is always a temptation when a landscape is this legible, to keep naming. This ripple means that, this firmness means this. The mind likes to turn surfaces into sentences, but the dune is not improved by constant translation, so I walk a little farther without adding to the account. A wind passes over the crest. I do not feel it first. I see it in the faint tremble of grains near the top, a quick skimming movement that barely reaches the lower slope where I stand. The long windward rise curves into the flank, and I follow that curve, where the dune begins to show older adjustments, small records of earlier slipping and repair. Here the shape grows more nuanced. The clean ripples of the windward approach give way to softened scars, shallow crescents and narrow runnels where sand has let go in the past and then been smoothed over again. In the last light, these older slip marks catch at a different angle from the newer surface. They are not deep, but they remain visible because change in a dune does not erase everything at once. One wind writes, another blurs. A third repeats the line in a nearby place. Over time, the dune becomes a layered record of the same few causes meeting over and over. This is what I mean when I think of the dune remembering wind. Not memory in the human sense. No intention, no hidden message, only form that preserves repeated action. A slope steepens by accumulation. A crest migrates grain by grain. A slipface collapses and reforms. The body of the dune stores these events as geometry. If I circle it carefully, each side offers a separate chapter of the same plain story. I kneel on the flank and lay my hand flat on the sand. The top is still faintly warm, enough to notice. When I press in a little deeper, the coolness beneath is immediate and clean. The evening has layers, just as the dune does. Surface, subsurface, release. Air, grain, gravity. Often what quiets me in a place like this is not the scale of it, but the repetition. The same processes continue whether I name them or not. A few grains cling to the heel of my hand and then fall away. They are rounder than beach sand, though not polished smooth. Desert transport makes grains surprisingly even, not glossy but worn into compatibility. That compatibility matters later. I brush the disturbed patch smooth again with 2 fingers. The small mark disappears almost at once. The dune is responsive. Touch changes it. Weight changes it. One small slide can soften back into the slope within minutes if the wind continues to work. The colors are changing faster now. Gold is leaving the upper sand. The flank goes silver-gray for a moment, then dims toward blue. Old slip scars that were almost invisible in stronger light now stand out softly, then sink back again as dusk evens the whole surface. It is a good time to notice how much our seeing depends on angle. Texture can look sharp or absent without the sand itself changing very much. A dune is read partly by the eye and partly by the body. My feet feel looseness before my eyes confirm it. My hand finds coolness before the air admits how late it is becoming. I continue around the curve. The dune's shoulder lifts above me now, and with it the sense of an edge just out of sight. On the far side lies the slipface, the sheltered lee where grains gather until the angle grows too steep to hold. That threshold has a plain mechanical name, the angle of repose. Dry granular materials can sustain only so much steepness. Past that point they release. The beauty of the term is in its calmness. Repose sounds like rest. And in a way it is. The slope settles into the steepest shape it can maintain, then adjusts when one more grain makes stillness impossible. As I start up toward the shoulder, I find I speak less, even inwardly. The dune does not need a commentary to become more precise. Dusk is taking care of that. The climb to the upper shoulder is gentle at first, then more exacting as the sand underfoot loosens. I step where the surface seems least ready to give way, angling slightly across the rise. Behind me, the basin floor has faded into one broad tone. Ahead, the crest line grows sharper, thin and pale against a darkening sky. A single bright planet appears low above the horizon, steady and early, enough to mark the hour without pulling attention away from the ground. Near the crest, the dune's geometry becomes unmistakable. The windward side I have crossed is a patient incline, but the lee side falls away more sharply, a clean drop of softer sand tucked out of the prevailing wind. This contrast is what builds the possibility of sound. Grains climb by one route and release by another. The dune is an engine of transfer slowed to geologic patience, and the slipface is where that patience briefly yields. I stop just short of the edge and look along it. The crest is not knife-sharp. It is a narrow, rounded lip, working rather than decorative. Grains arrive here one by one or in skimming sheets, depending on the wind. Some settle on top. Some tip over and disappear down the sheltered face. Over hours, days, longer seasons, that repeated transfer carries the whole dune slowly onward. Nothing about it is hurried, yet everything is mobile. When I test the sand with one careful step, a thin ribbon slips from beneath my boot and threads down the far side. I hear a soft rushing hiss, dry and brief, intimate, almost inside the ear. It is not the dune's note, only the first language of release. The ribbon widens for a moment, then narrows and stops. The slope heals around it, leaving a fresh, slightly darker line where deeper grains have been exposed. Another little shift sends a second veil downward. Again, only a hiss. Nearly right is not the same as right. The urge is to turn this into a demonstration, to force a larger slide and pull a sound from the dune as proof. But the thought feels coarse against the evening. A singing dune is not a button to press. So I lower myself onto the upper lee slope with care, heels first, weight spread, and feel at once how different this side is. The slipface receives me like flour receiving a spoon. My feet sink more deeply. The surface is loose and delicate, and even the smallest change in balance sends grains whispering down slope. Here the dune is not being packed. Here it is storing what has already crossed the crest. Whatever reaches the lee has arrived by selection. Grains too large or awkward to travel in the prevailing system are less common. The ones that gather here have been handled again and again. I settle one hand into the slope and watch the grains part around my fingers. They run in tiny streams, then stop, each finding a stable line. When a larger surface avalanche produces a note, it begins in this kind of movement, multiplied across a broader sheet. Thousands, then millions of grains slide together. Their collisions and friction do not remain random. Under the right conditions, dry enough not to bind, similar enough in size to move as a group rather than a jumble, the sliding layer synchronizes enough to create a coherent vibration. That vibration couples with the sand beneath, and the dune body helps amplify it. The result is the low hum people travel to hear in famous fields of singing sand around the world. The word singing is graceful, though the sound itself is often closer to a hum, a boom, a drawn-out bass note, something felt in the chest before it is understood as music. People compare it to a cello, an organ pipe, a plucked wire enlarged by earth. I try not to choose too soon among those comparisons. Better to wait and let the ear meet whatever comes. With the side of my hand I loosen a small patch no larger than a placemat. Sand pours down slope in a thin sheet. The hiss deepens, and for a fraction of a second there is almost a tone hiding in it, a suggestion more than an event. Then it is gone. Nearly right. Again nearly right. The science lives in the near miss as much as in the successful note. The grains are dry, the slope is active, the layer is capable of moving as a group, but only just now, only in small measures. Sometimes a dune sounds best when a broader patch releases with uniform thickness. Too thin, and you get only whispering. Too mixed, and the movement loses coherence. Too damp, and everything sticks into silence. I lean back and look up the face toward the crest. Against the darkening sky, it seems simpler now than it did in sunlight. Day reveals details one by one. Night gathers them into relation. I can still see the faint lines of old slips crossing the slope, places where previous releases have smoothed and re-smoothed the sand. Each line marks a brief surrender to gravity, then a return to the dune's maintained angle. If the wind is the author of the dune's broad form, gravity is its editor. Silence broadens between these thoughts. I find I do not mind it. A little earlier I wanted to keep pace with everything I observed, to make the evening legible as I went. Here that instinct loosens. The dune asks for another kind of company, not passive, not blank, only less busy. So I stop testing it for a while. I descend a few careful steps lower on the lee slope and sit where the angle eases, close enough to feel any movement above me, far enough not to disturb the upper face. Sand gathers around my boots. The last warmth seeps away from the surface. When I reach down and bury my fingers to the second knuckle, the cool layer below feels more established now, as if night has finished moving in under the skin of the dune. This is the part one like best, though it contains almost nothing to report. Early night in the desert is made of subtraction. Light leaves the crest. Color thins. The air loses the day's stored pressure. Shapes simplify. Even the sounds become more exact because there are fewer of them. A faint wind passes above, not strong enough to lift much, only enough to freshen the crest with a skimming touch. Somewhere far out on the flat, a small insect begins and stops. Then stillness again. I sit with the dune and notice how the body learns a slope. At first the angle asks for adjustment. Ankles flex, hips brace. Then, after a little while, the posture becomes ordinary. The grains under me settle minutely and stop. My breathing grows easier to hear than anything outside it. The shift from reaching toward an event to simply inhabiting the conditions around it arrives without announcement. The dune is already demonstrating it through form. A few grains slip from higher up and tick softly past. Then nothing. Then a slightly larger stir, still above me, perhaps from the wind touching the crest or from a small over-steepened pocket giving way under its own weight. I do not turn quickly. Quickness seems misplaced here. I listen. The first part is only a rush, as before, a narrow ribbon descending. Then, almost hidden inside the rush, the sound gathers. It deepens and smooths. For one breath, perhaps two, the dune answers with a low humming note, quiet but unmistakable, a tone felt in the chest as much as heard in the ear. It is not loud. It does not ring across the desert night like a performance. It simply holds together long enough to reveal that all the earlier hisses were neighbors of this, smaller versions waiting for alignment. The note fades back into brushing sand and then into stillness. I remain where I am. There is no need to respond. The moment is complete at its own scale. What moves me is not that the dune has done something rare for my sake. It is that the sound proves how much coordination can exist in a material we usually call loose. Dry grains, moving under gravity on a steep slope, briefly finding enough order to vibrate as one. A whole physical explanation condensed into a single low hum. After it ends, the silence is not empty. It feels structured now, as if I can sense the conditions that made the note possible even though the note itself is gone. Above me the slipface holds. Below me the sand around my boots cools further. The crest line, now almost black, carries one thin seam of starlight along its edge. I think of the windward face, the firm approach, the sorted grains, the old scars around the flank, the threshold at the crest. None of those parts was separate. The sound belonged to all of them. I do not try to make it happen again. One brief hum is enough to join the theory to the body. The deeper calm comes from knowing the dune will continue this work whether I am here or not. Wind will rise again another day. Grains will travel the long incline. The crest will pass them over. The lee face will steepen, release, and settle, and perhaps under some future dry twilight produce the same low note for no audience at all. After a time I stand and move slowly down toward the base, feeling the slope flatten under me. The sand grows firmer with each step. At the foot of the dune I turn back and let my eyes follow its full shape one more time. From here the different faces join into one coherent form. The windward back that stored the day's movement, the flank with its pale record of earlier slips, the crest where balance narrows, the sheltered face where gravity finally speaks aloud. Nothing in it is mysterious once you have touched the surfaces and listened to the changes. Wind, grain, dryness, slope, cooling air, gravity, ordinary causes, patiently repeated, until a dune can sing. The night sky has sharpened, but only a little. A few stars are enough. They hang above the dune without commentary. The real interest of this place is close at hand, in a material small enough to run through the fingers. Each grain is slight. Together they build a body large enough to hold form, to migrate, to resonate. Rest can begin there, in that scale change, from many tiny contacts to one gathered sound. I think again of the warm surface from an hour ago and the coolness just beneath it, of the faint hisses that came before the hum, of how often the world offers transition long before it offers event. The dune is still now. Old slip scars have gone pale in the dark. The fresh ribbon that sounded a moment ago has already softened at the edges, easing itself back into the lee face. Tomorrow another wind will revise the crest. Another evening will draw heat out of the upper sand. Another small release may travel down slope and vanish, or gather into a note. The process does not need witness to continue. I stay at the base a little longer, saying less and less. Dry air, cooling ground, a slope at rest for now. Before me the dune keeps its patient crescent shape, already being ridden again by wind. Thank you for spending this time with the Night Sky Reader. May your night be peaceful. Until next time, rest well.